Ask the Podcast Coach for May 24th, 2025.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it is Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from TheAverageGuy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Welcome back. We had an unexpected power outage on your end last week. I was ready to go. I had the generator up and running. Apparently an extension cord from Omaha to Ohio.
Not going to work.
It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work. Good day.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I went to bed with no power. Luckily, I had a ton of those, charging bricks, so I could keep my phone charged. But I was really surprised when I woke up and was like, oh, we still have no power. And it wasn't a tornado. I guess it was severe thunderstorms, but it sure looked like a tornado because there were trees down. I woke up, there was like a branch like 3 feet from my tree. And what's weird is when you see a branch on the ground, you look up to see kind of, hey, what tree did that come from? And I have no idea because there were no broken. I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, it's good to be back. But I went to all the plan Bs, like, I'll just, gleam some Wi-Fi off the library. And it was like, nope, sorry, they don't have any power. I'll just go to McDonald's. I'll just go to the other McDonald's. And it was like, okay, nobody had power. And I was like, all right, I guess we're not doing a show this week. But, you make it through. And one of the ways you make it through, of course, is with a nice piping hot cup of Java there. And that coffee pour is brought to you by the one and only Mark over at podcastbranding.co. And the beautiful thing about Mark, besides his beautiful artwork that he makes for you, he's made over 500 pieces of artwork for people, is the fact that Mark is a podcaster himself. He's been doing graphics since he was a wee lad, probably at this point. And he's going to sit down with you one-on-one. And it's not just artwork. He can make a whole website for you. If you're doing a lead magnet, if you're going to be presenting at a conference and you need a PowerPoint that needs a little jazz to it, Mark is the guy you want to talk to. He's just an amazing guy. And the beauty of it is, instead of you coming up with the ideas, he'll go over, check out your show, let him do the marketing, then you just kind of give him an idea if he's headed in the right direction. And that's the beautiful thing. And that's why I've used him for a lot of my artwork. So when it comes time to make a good first impression, because, they see you before they hear you, there's only one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co.
And of course, big thanks to our good friend over there, Dan Lefebvre, over there, based on a true story podcast.com. This week, not a real enemy. What he's looking at, he says, go behind the true stories shown in Holocaust movies through the experiences of Robert Wolf's family. Since we'll be talking about the Holocaust, listener discretion is advised. So if you're into that, those kinds of stories, those kinds of movies, that is featured this week based on a true story podcast. And you can find it based on a true story podcast.com. As always, Dan, thanks for your sponsorship. And I've upgraded the mug a little bit. My granddaughter gave me this sticker that I put on the back of the. You like that? Yeah. So that's
it. It looks like she's like shooting out of the cup.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
That last weekend, she was over last weekend, and she was handing out stickers over her face. And I was like, oh, I've got the perfect spot for it. There you go.
It's beautiful. And holy cow, starting off with a super chat. Oh, look, we got super chat anime now, which is great fun. From Chris Stone from castahead.net. Thank you so much for that. Always fun. And yeah, it is nice to be back. A little rusty. I got up early this morning. I spent a lot of time last night making sure everything would work. And even this morning, I hit a button and nothing happened. And I was like, why does that happen? But if you have a question, of course, you can go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question. If you're listening to this later, go to School of Podcast. Did I say School of Podcasting? How about Is it really? See, I do need more coffee. Go to askthepodcastcoach.com/question, and you can jump into the video while we're live. And if you're listening to this later, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/voicemail, and you can jump right in. But I saw this and I wanted to share this one. It's interesting. It's for those people who do interviews. This is from Rich Pfeiffer. I'm pretty sure that's just Pfeiffer, maybe, or Pfeiffer. I don't know. But anyway, he says, I've interviewed about 12 artists for 12 episodes, my podcast so far. So I've a list of questions to use as conversation starters, and it works well. However, after the recording is done, I often have a conversation with them, and we often will come up things we should have talked about on the recording. Does anyone have any advice how to handle this? A few ideas I have. Leave the microphone recording. It's a better process for a pre-interview. Wait, I think this is like A, B, and C. One is leave the microphone recording. B, have a better process for a pre-interview. C, better prep for the guest when we arrive at the studio before hitting record. And turn the mic back on when we think of something interesting. So I would say all of those. He said, I sometimes feel like the excitement starts after I turn the mic off. And the thing is, we always hear about people talking about making the guest feel relaxed. And that's one of the things that happens because the red light comes on, you're on the record, and now answer this question. That's why you don't want to make it feel like an interrogation. So when you're like, all right, thank you so much, and you hit or in my case, I forgot to hit the record button. Oh, nope, I'm using an old SD card that won't let me record. Great fun. And, but you hit stop, and now the red light's not in their face, even though there isn't really a red light, and they relax. So somebody said in Facebook or wherever this was, Reddit, and they said, oh, just let it roll, and then later just edit it. And I was like, that's kind of not cool, because if you say, all right, thank you so much, it is assumed that you are off the record and that you are no longer recording. And if they then spill the beans, or I guess the kids are now saying if they spill the tea, I don't know. We moved from there's more protein in beans, kids. But if you want to spill the tea, that's fine. Mm-hmm. You've spilled the tea, and now you hey, I remember once I was on a show and was talking a little smack, and I'm like, hey, when are we going to start the show? And they're like, oh, we're rolling. And I'm like, oh, well, guess what? You don't have my permission to use the first 6 minutes of this conversation. I go, that's not cool, kids. So. But I would just say a pre-interview, because it sounds like he's got his checklist of questions, and I don't know. He says, I have a list of questions to use as a conversation starter. My guess is, are those the same questions for every guest? Because if so, I mean, there are icebreakers and such, but I was just thinking, shouldn't you have questions for each guest? Because I don't know. To me, sounds like he's having fun, probably doing a good job. But for me, it just sounds like maybe you didn't do quite enough homework. And the problem is your interview is now your homework. And then you found all these cool things to talk about. But maybe, and again, I'm completely guessing here, maybe now he's like, okay, well, I got to stop here because it's 27 minutes. I don't know. Thoughts, Jim?
I like the idea of scripting out, the first couple questions. That doesn't mean you need to stick to them or you need to read them. But I do like having some questions that are available to you. You get in it, inevitably, especially if you're doing it live like we do here. Inevitably, something will go wrong and will throw you off a little bit. And if you are, even a veteran podcaster who's kind of thinking, yeah, I've done this 1,000 times, I'll be good. I just had a situation this week where I got thrown off in the beginning of a live call, and I didn't have it as tightly scripted in my head as I wanted it to be. And I kind of tripped over my words, and it wasn't great. Now, nobody noticed, but I did. And so I think it's a good idea to have the first, 5 or 10 minutes fairly scripted out. Doesn't mean it needs to be word for word. It can be bullet points or an outline or something along those lines. Just something to go to in case you get rattled. I'm not worried about you. You're like, oh, I've done this a lot. I get it. I know how to do it. But I'm not worried about those situations. It's when you're in those situations and something happens, the buttons don't work or the animations don't happen or the music doesn't play right away or whatever, right? just to kind of keep you on track. You can always go around it or avoid it or not use it. But I think the over preparation for it saves your bacon more often than it doesn't. Some folks see that over prep. It's like, oh, it's wasted time. No, it actually prepares you for the interview. Even if you don't use it, it gets you in the right mental, the right mental state. So I remember back in the days when Bill Walsh for the San Francisco 49ers started scripting the first 15 plays of every football game. And that was revolutionary when he started
Right.
doing it. And I remember people thinking, oh, but doesn't that limit you? I mean, what if you want to adjust like after the third play? And he'd be like, no, like the first 15 is about right. And then we'll start, like, in each one of those plays had a reason. They were trying to check the defense. They were trying to do some things with it, right? I think we could get smart with our podcast too and have maybe the first 15 minutes kind of figured out. Again, depends how long your if you're doing a 7-minute live show every day, then okay, you're right, do it accordingly. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, Jody says, I ask the same question of every guest at the beginning of my episodes, but then chat about their expertise. Yeah, I remember Rob Walsh used to start off every interview for Podcast 411 with, what was your first computer? And it just led to a story and, that whole 9 yards. But yeah, it's, I always come up with questions for the guest, and I have them on a sheet here to my left, and then I have some sort of pad, and I have some sort of, I don't have any now, but usually I have pens that don't click, because if I'm holding a pen that clicks, I'm going to sit here and do this and drive the audience nuts.
Yeah. Oh, I've done that. I have done that before.
And then I'm listening for if they say something and I want to ask a follow-up question. I just write down a word that will trigger the follow-up question. Because if I have to sit there and remember the follow-up question, don't forget to ask him about the coffee. Don't forget to ask him about the coffee. And then they say something else. And I'm like, oh, I got to ask him about the generator. Oh, generator and the coffee. Meanwhile, I'm trying to listen. And so if I can just write down a word, then when they're done listening or when they're done talking, I can go to my follow-up question. But yeah, a lot of times it's funny. I'll get done with an interview and I've asked 2 of my, 6 questions, but those are kind of like you said, the football, that's my game plan. That's where I think I'm going to go. But if the guest leads me in some direction that I didn't plan on, but still works. I just was on I forgot to put his face on the screen. That's not heard of. But Chris from castahead.net does the show Dealcasters with Jim. Yeah. Why am I saying that? Because I called him Jeff like 3 times in the show. I was like, oh, that doesn't look good.
Ouch.
And the reason for that is his last name begins with F. And for some reason in my brain, I saw the F in his last name and said, oh, that's easy to remember because his name is Jeff, and Jeff with an F. And yeah, his name is Jim. That's not embarrassing at all. But, I was on Dealcasters, and they have this monster guitar riff in their intro. And I'm sitting there, I'm in the green room waiting to come on because it's a live show. And I couldn't help it. I was like, because Chris said, hey, we're going to play the intro and then we'll introduce you. And I'm like, wait, I got 30 seconds. And I'm like, I just need to know what key is this in? So I grabbed my guitar and picked it up real quick. I was like, okay, it's in C. I have to play. It's a guitar player thing. And so Chris saw that. And then we started talking about theme songs or whatever. We got into how a podcaster is a little bit like a musician in the fact that in theory, there's a lot of planning involved. Like I don't learn the chord C and go bring, and then immediately go out to the street and go, hey, who wants to pay me to hear me play the key of C? Bring, no, it doesn't work that way. And so we're talking about woodshedding. And so there are times, it's a really long way to go. Sometimes your guest goes in a direction you didn't plan. And Chris and I and Jim, not Jeff, Jim, we're having fun just riffing there at the beginning of the show. So that's the fun of an interview. You either, now Chris could have easily said, well, that's really cool. Great. Now getting back to podcasting, he could have done one of those to kind of like, hey, can we get back to why you're actually here? But we were having fun, and I eventually pulled it into podcasting, and it was fun-filled and exciting. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes when we're done here. And let me make sure. Yeah, speaking of Chris, he says everyone, everyone has a podcast interview plan until they get punched in the face. Yes, the famous Mike Tyson quote, slightly altered for podcasting. That's always fun. But yeah, interviews are, a lot of people think, oh, it's just as easy. Am I saying the wrong name? It's Jim. Jeff, because Uncle Marv is saying it's Jeff. No, I called him Jeff. His name is, you know what? I'm going to have to go over to Dealcast. I'm pretty sure it's Jim because I was very, very embarrassed. Yeah. And then Chris says, seeing Dave Jackson figure out our guitar riff changed the trajectory of the entire interview, and it made it way better, and it was fun. It was, we were having a blast on that show, and I'm pretty sure that's going to come through. And, that's kind of speaking of that, having fun on your show, because we're just going to transition to that. If you, I consider him a friend, Kevin Schmidlin, because it's fun just to say Schmidlin, is rebranding his show. It used to be called Grow the Show, which I thought was a great brand. It is a great brand, and he is rebranding it. And what's funny is he told me what the new brand was, and I can't remember exactly, but what I'm looking for behind the scenes is if I go to that episode and I pull up my thing, yeah, he has an episode called Why I'm Changing the Name. And here's why, because we were just talking about podcasting being fun and hanging out with Chris and Jim, of course, not Jeff. We're hanging out with Jim. And this is what Kevin said.
If you're going to create content, if you're going to build an audience, you got to be interested in it.
Let's
you
not,
have to
let's
keep it
not listen to Kevin. Let's not listen to Kevin at 1.7, shall we? Holy cow. Talk about needing some coffee. Let's try that again.
If you're going to create content, if you're going to build an audience, you got to be interested in it. You have to keep it interesting for yourself. I'm going to be frank. I'm a little burned out on talking about podcast intros. I'm a little burned out answering beginner questions on podcasting. And if you think back to realization number 1, audience churn, it's kind of exhausting to every 6 months have new people who all have the same new questions and are making the same new mistakes.
So why is he rebranding? He's not having fun anymore. Like, he's just like, I've, time to make the donuts kind of thing. And on the show with Chris, we started off in fact, the whole thing was just kind of having a blast. I know those guys. I've actually met them in person. Good guys. And, yeah, so it was, when I heard that, because I was like, why? It's like when, back in the day when Cliff Ravenscraft left being the podcast answer man, because everybody knew him as the podcast answer man. And I think he changed to the attitude man or something, but we're all like, why would you spend 8 years building a brand and go, yeah, I don't want to be that anymore? Because everybody still knows him as the podcast answer man. I heard he came and everybody said, Cliff, you're crazy for leaving that brand. And after so many years, he came back. The problem was, like, everybody's like, oh, he's still around? Like, that boat sailed. And if I was Kevin, I get it. I hate doing a show that you don't want to do, but man, that was a strong brand. And he still has. It's still going to be called the Grow the Show Accelerator and a couple other things. And I don't think he has the new name in his show notes. No. But I just heard that and I was like, well, that's why. It's got to be fun. And so when you're starting a podcast, you should have a topic that you want to talk about for years for free. Because when you first start out, you may not have an audience and it's going to take a while to grow one, and you may grow the wrong one and things like that. There are no guarantees. As much as people say, I will guarantee you money from day one, or I will guarantee you downloads. Well, guess what? Two is downloads. They're not lying when they say 2, but if it's not fun, all the shows that I have ever quit, the reason I quit is because it wasn't fun anymore. Thank you, Daily Sports History Podcast. Kevin's new show name is Chief Audience Officer. I'm not sure that rings audience officer. Are people searching for audience officer? I just was like, I love that guy, man. He's a good guy. I've hung out with him at conferences. And he says, I think he shifted from beginner podcasting to more business-minded podcasts, which he's always done. He's always like, hey, if you need a podcast for your business, creating grooming dogs. Chrissy says, I burned out my podcast for a while. I got my mojo back by making some changes. And of course, she joined the School of Podcasting, and that can help. Here's what's interesting. Just a little behind the scenes. I mean, I start off my show everyone because my business coach told me, right? I'm your award-winning Hall of Fame podcaster. I'm looking through my feedback now because I've been doing a survey, and apparently that's not enough street cred. And I'm like, really? Like that's because they're like, well, can you show us somebody who's been successful? And I'm like, besides, Glenn the Geek or I don't know, Darren Dake, who's making six figures. Like not everybody. I can't make everybody six figures, but I was like, okay. So that's the thing. Here's a fun question. We'll throw this out. Because this came up in the School of Podcasting and it came up it came up in the School of Podcasting because I was talking about my survey. Jim, if somebody said, I want you to teach a class on advanced podcasting, what would those topics be?
That's good. That's a good question. Advanced podcasting. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about this a little bit. Let's dialogue. Let's workshop it, Dave.
Yeah, because I know part of it is because part of it I'm confused. I mean, I get it. It's not a bad question. But if there's a guy and he's got a shovel and he's been digging for a while and he's in a hole that goes down to about his knee and he looks at me and says, hey, how do I dig a hole? I need advanced hole digging. Well, part of me would go, what, is your shovel dull? No, watch here. Here's another. There you go. Look at all that dirt that came out. I'd be like, okay. You got blisters on your hands? No? Okay. So if you keep digging, it'll get deeper, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, the answer is, the good news is you're making progress. You're in a hole now. It's about 2 feet deep. Keep digging. Now, there are other things, right? You could go get if you've got the budget, go buy one of them claw-looking things that digs holes. There are things like backhoe. There's all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
use an auger for something like that. Yeah, but it's our tools. This is going to cause some arguments in the chat room.
Oh yeah,
are using more tools advanced? Like, is that a mark of advancement? Now I'm using the latest. The latest DAW, or I've got the most expensive equipment. If I'm using a ATR 2100 and I move to a SM7B, does that mean I went from beginning podcasting to advanced, right? Or is mic technique a more advanced topic? In other words, what you do, can you get better with your technique and with your content and with the layout? I actually, just having tools doesn't make you better, right? You need to know how to use those tools. So I think as I'm workshopping this with you, I think the advanced level of it is taking advantage and getting more mileage, more ROI out of whatever you have. Doesn't matter. Like you can do, I'm on a 2100 here. It sounds just fine. In fact, I think it's the best microphone for my voice. Or it's what most people are used to and what I'm used to. So I like it, right? It's one of those kinds of things. But I think maybe in those advanced topics come in creating content and having good skill in making the content. Yeah. Now, listen, there can be people who like the chaos of a show that's not necessarily 100% scripted, where it has problems. Sounds a lot like our show sometimes here. Right. And you guys keep coming back on Saturday mornings, or you're listening to it in the podcast feed, or you're watching it on YouTube. So the idea of advanced, that also may be an idea, Dave, where you don't get to say that. Somebody needs to say that about you type deal. Right. They're at an advanced level. I don't know. It's certainly a place to boast, right? It's one of those areas. I'm an advanced podcaster. I know some, and I don't do the beginning things anymore. So I don't know. It's a good question.
Well,
I
the
don't know
chat,
if there's subscribed levels, right? Go ahead.
yeah, the chat room's going. They got lots of ideas here. Where did it go? Craig says advanced hole digging is telling other people where to dig the hole, which that's
Maybe.
where I always say, like, hey, instead of spending money on postcards to send in the mail or advertising in an app that where people listen to podcasts, I would do the second one because, postcards, yeah, you might get somebody that knows how to use a QR code, but we don't even know if those people listen to podcasts. Where if you're advertising Spotify or Overcast or Buzzsprout ads or whatever, at least those people we know listen to podcasts. Here's one. Audio says, Jody says, maybe making your audio, make sure it's top notch and your video background is professional. How to monetize, whatever that means, how to get the best guests, how to grow your show. That could be advanced. It kind of depends on your show and how helpful you think it will be. I love this one. Chris says, using more tools is not advanced. May think so, but it's like, in the end, people aren't going, hey, have you listened to this guy's show? It's like butter for your ears. No, it's the content. John Jamango, advanced podcasting topics for me would be introducing and teaching new technologies that are available like Cast Magic, ChatGPT, Riverside, or something on the edge. So that would be new. If it's advanced, see, advanced is the tricky part. Jody says also a lot of advanced podcasters have a team. It's not just them, so maybe how to pick a team. Craig says again, in my opinion, an advanced podcasting skill is speaking effectively with very few filler words and hesitations. Also, intonation to engage the audience. Yeah, here's the thing. Wait a minute. Do we have to do one of these just for a second?
And now it's time for a power rant.
If I have someone else in a monotone voice read someone's LinkedIn bio to me, I'm going to jump out the window. I cannot, it's nothing will make me hit stop, swipe, delete faster than on today's show. We're talking with Dr. Jim Fuse from, he's a graduate of Cornell, top in his class. His dog's name is Tippy. Has been married for 4. I don't care. Just so please quit reading me. Find the part of the bio that is relevant. That's my new favorite word. Relevant to the audience. So if Dr. Jim has a podcast with 100,000 listeners, that's the part that we want to key on. Even my last episode, I interviewed Tracy Johnson, who's been in radio forever. And I was like, I went to read his bio and I'm like, I'm not reading that. That's way too long. Guy's been in radio. I'm like, you're a big shot smarty pants. I told him, I said, hey, in my world, that's a high praise. And I go, my audience knows what that means. It means too long. Don't want to read it. You're here because you wrote a book about interviewing people because that's what applied. So please quit doing that. But
I think Dave, we need to be careful though to separate skill and style. Right? Because some of the things you're talking about are style and some of them are skill. Let's Mitch Hedberg, I think, is a great example as a comedian who had terrible technique, right? If you'd think about how to do stand-up comedy, he went against all the conventions. And it's not because he necessarily thought that would be great. He just wanted to do stand-up. He was always high and he would get up there and just say words, right? And he was very, very successful, creating almost a new genre of comedy. And so if someone had said, oh no, if you're going to do comedy, you got to sound like Jerry Seinfeld, well, do you ever wonder why the Jerry Seinfeld thing, right?
what's wrong with these people?
If that was the only style that was out there, everything would be boring. So I think we need to, as we think about podcasting, we need to separate technique or skill and then style, because there's just some styles you don't prefer. You don't. I'm by the way, I'm with you on the LinkedIn profile or the LinkedIn bio reading. I tell my guests all the time, we're not going to read your bio because people leave in droves when bios start getting read, right? But that's a style, right? That's not necessarily a skill. And so when we think about this, and then the other thing I would say on advanced versus beginning, the question I would ask is, why does it matter? Like, if we're trying to put ourselves ahead of someone else for some reason, then advanced versus beginning doesn't matter. If we're trying to help people, right? If we're trying to say, hey, here's some things to think about in the way you do your podcast that may help you get better, that may be an advanced technique, but you being advanced in that is helping them, not you necessarily promoting yourself in a way that is maybe not valuable to the community. So I want to separate. I want to separate those two out. I think sometimes, because you never know on a style type thing, you never know when maybe a lack of skill is going to create a new style. You may not have the right voice to do, to do the most perfect podcast. Another example from when we were kids is Paul Harvey, right?
Paul
He
Harvey?
did he did a whole different style. His style, now we think of it as being normal now, but in the day, that was a new for radio. That was kind of a new, hello Americans, and that Paul's style was different. And so I don't want to get into a podcast echo chamber where we have I'm using air quotes now, where we have advanced podcasters telling people their style, it has to be a certain way. Oh no, you got to do it this way. Although we just did that. We told people don't read LinkedIn bios. That's an example of telling someone how to do a style, right? Type deal. So I want to be careful, because there's a lot of creativity in style that if we start making recommendations on that, and all of a sudden we all sound the same, we're all doing the same thing.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Well,
let's be sensitive to that, because there's some new styles out there we haven't seen yet. Let's not crush those styles by thinking we're advanced podcasters, I guess is what I'm saying.
And when you're reading a bio, though, from LinkedIn, you're breaking rule number 1, which of course is
don't be boring.
Yeah, don't be boring. And most people would agree.
You and I agree.
Yeah, and a lot of people in the chat room now we're into pet peeves, but here's some other things. Let's see. We have a question we'll go back to, Ralph, about the email list. Dan Lefebvre from Based on a True Story Podcast.com. When I worked in adult education, advanced means something different to everyone. So we based it on a level of prereqs, which is needed. Chris says advanced storytelling. That's a good one. Read the book Storyworthy if you haven't already. That is advanced storytelling, and that's interesting, because I've talked about that in the past on the School of Podcasting, but it's that's one where you get imposter syndrome. You're like, well, I can just tell you to go read the book. Like, why? Who am I to talk about storytelling? But there are some things I've learned. A lot of things I've learned from that book.
Well, there's 2 levels on this too of learning. There's acquiring the knowledge. You can read and take classes and get more information. Then there's applying it, right? Actually using it. This is where the skill part comes back in, where I can know good mic technique. I can study the best people who do it. I can talk about it and read and go to classes and even get some coaching. But then at the end of the day, I actually have to apply it, right? I've got to be able to do it on a consistent basis, right?
Bingo. Yeah. This is the thing. I kind of want to go when people are like, I'm ready for level 2, because I do this. I had a meeting with my coach this week, and they said, okay. And I'm like, yeah, what am I supposed to be working on? And am I supposed to be doing this? Am I supposed to be doing this? And then he goes, well, did you do like step 3 yet? He goes, you're asking about step 6 and 7. Did you do step 3? And I'm like, oh yeah. That's, sometimes I think in fact, Ralph says this here. Advanced to me means for those who are solid in foundation, but need to take a little further and get deeper. Better speaking techniques, better content ideas. Better content ideas is that's something I can tell you what to do, but I can't go, here they are, because it's, it's your audience. So like, I'll give you an example of why I know my next episode, if I don't completely just drop the ball, should get some feedback. Because when I tell, and here I'll tell you, my next episode is going to be how to create, or what is the characteristics of a good hook, and how I have sucked at these for 19 years. And when I tell people that I'm working on that, I talked about it yesterday at lunch with Dave, and a few people are like, oh, cool. Like when you see your audience go, oh, when is that coming out? That's when you know you're doing something right. And that for me comes about from listening to my audience. And I had enough people say, how do you keep them like listening? How do you keep them listening? And I'm like, well, first things first, don't read their LinkedIn bio. That's not to keep them listening, but okay, but what's the opposite of that? And what's weird is a good hook has probably more, a deeper level of selling that you're not comfortable with. Like there's a little bit of like, hey, did you know, like I'm going to start off with a big stat. Did you know that blah, blah, blah can do such and such? But wait, and did you know that so-and-so, and today I'm going to show you why that's a lie. And you're like, wait, what? You just gave me this great big thing. And then you're saying that's not true because that's amazing. So first, big, amazing fact, blah, 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 blah. And the audience is like, what? And then they're like, and this is why the thing. And so there's always a left turn somewhere in there. Or, are you doing this wrong? Are you swallowing saliva in small amounts or a long period of time? Let me explain to you why that's going to kill you, whatever. So when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I see why people don't do these. They're very salesy, but if they're relevant, again, my new keyword, and it really goes back. And if you're on YouTube, have fun, because there's another 4 layers of that, because now you got to throw a bunch of things on the screen to get them to visually grab them. So why do you think every, and I mean every, and I'm not saying this because I'm a perv, I'm saying this because it's like so smack in your face. And I'm okay, 99% of any female YouTube short playing the guitar, the guitar is up a little high and the girls are getting pushed up and out. It's just cleavage all over the place. And I'm like, okay, it's like, you cannot, it's the only thing to look at. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? But it gets people to click. And so that visual thing is a whole other thing. But I wonder sometimes, because I'm guilty of this. Can you think anything, Jim, where you're like, you think you're ready for part 2 and you haven't really finished part 1 yet? Like, have you gone into Apple Podcasts? And Courtney, I love Courtney. She's Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. She's been on my show, and she just talked about this, how she went into her show, grabbed the last 10 episodes, and said, what's the average length? And you can download this into a CSV. And then she took the completion percentage, added them up, divided it by 10. Why 10? Because she's looking at the last 10 episodes. So take that data, the last 10 episodes, and find out what the average is. And then, if it's below 70%, maybe we need to change the length of her show. And it didn't dawn on me, but I've really been enjoying her show. Well, you know why? It's now 15 minutes. It is to the point. Here it is. Here's the tip. Here's how it worked. Here's how you do it. Hit it, quit it, and we're done. And it's also like now almost my favorite shower show because it's 15 minutes. And and when she does an interview, she often breaks it into 2 spots. Now that doesn't mean everybody needs to do a 15-minute show. It means her audience likes a 15-minute show. And so have you done that yet? Have you gone in and look at your completion percentage? And you're like, well, I need it to be 30 minutes, Dave, because I've got to cover these broad topics. Okay, well, where are you losing them? and we're always going to lose a few at the beginning because those are your subscribers and they've heard you say, it's Saturday morning, it's that music, Jim, coffee pour. They're like, no, we're going to skip everything and go right to about the 4-minute mark. We know that. And so, but have you done that yet? And I know a lot of people, when I go, well, what are your Apple stats? And they go, oh, it's about, my host says it's about 42% of my downloads. I'm like, no. How far are people listening? They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, okay, it's nothing wrong with that. You don't know what you don't know. But then when they go in and they look at their completion percentage and it's, 39%, I'm like, oh, that's not good. And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, yeah, because I'm an old teacher. So have you done that yet? So that would be, to me, it sounds advanced, but I'm like, that's kind of like, that's the basic stuff. Before you start promoting your show, have some people eat your food before you open your restaurant. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I disagree with the industry on this one.
Okay.
Listen, I know. Yeah, I know. You go in and you check your stats, and okay, if after 20 minutes people are dropping off, and you think, let's just say it's like 40 or 50% are dropping off after 20 minutes, and we think, oh, that tells me I should do shorter shows. Actually, it doesn't. It tells you there are still people engaged after 15 minutes. Now, it's only half, but there's still listeners, right? There's still people listening to it. You can always make a long show shorter. In other words, they can stop. Maybe that's their commute. Maybe that's all they have on the treadmill. Maybe that's all they have the time for. Maybe they're listening to your best 15 minutes. But you have a whole other group of people who are still listening. And you just cut them off. You can't make a short show longer. So my advice on this, I hesitate to even call it advice. My thought on this, and it's always been this way, is to make them as long as you've got time to make them, and let the audience decide how long they're going to listen for. You're going to have some super engaged listeners who want more. And when you cut it off artificially because of some silly stat that you looked at and didn't completely understand, you're like, oh, this is telling me I need everybody's, listen, we have this idea that everybody has short attention spans, and it's just a lie.
That is a lie.
And we binge on stuff, right? I had no problem going and watching. You and I both watched the last, allegedly, Mission Impossible movie that came out last night, right?
Yeah.
We sat through 3 hours? Is that thing? I mean,
I just know I had to pee really bad, man. When that movie was over.
This ADHD, short attention span thing that we're going through. I'm not saying there are people who absolutely suffer from it, but I think we've collectively come down on this. Oh, we got to catch them short. No, that's not the truth. I think we actually have the capacity now for longer content when it's good, right? When it's interesting. And let me decide how much I listen. As a podcaster, I shouldn't be deciding for my audience how long they listen. If you've got good content and you got an hour's worth of good content, give them an hour. Let them decide if they got 15 minutes. Let them decide if they got 30 minutes. Now, what I like to think is load your podcast, put your best stuff up front.
Yep.
Give your best stuff as soon as possible for those folks that only have a few minutes. And then if you want to chit chat and jabber and throw it on the end, listen, there's folks who love that stuff. And if you take it away from them, you're robbing them of their joy. So don't do that. If you want to go 7 minutes, that's fine. If you want to go 15 minutes, that's fine. You do what you want to do, but don't go artificially short because you think people have short attention spans or they won't listen longer.
Right.
There will be people who find that longer stuff interesting. The other side of that, Dave, is when we used to make these shows that were 90 or were 60 minutes long, and I had some folks come in and say, oh, when they see the timestamp and it's an hour, they automatically decommit. Well, maybe, but we do courses, at Gallup where I work, we do courses, and overwhelmingly the feedback we get from those courses is, I wish we'd have had more time for this theme content. It's very specific to what we do. they're wanting more of that, not less. And I shortened up those episodes to 15 minutes because of some philosophy like, oh, yeah, no, people can't listen. I fought that battle and lost it. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, enough. I'll just do 15-minute episodes. You know what gets the most place? The longer ones. So it's
Oh
just,
yeah.
I think we have to stop thinking that way. And because 50% or even if it's 10% of your audience that wants a little bit more, if you're willing to make it for them, give it to them, right?
Yeah.
You do what you have enough interesting content for, and stop worrying about the timestamps. That's my
Yeah.
take.
Well, I totally agree, because I'm like, if we really had the short attention spans, and they're getting shorter and shorter, we hear that all the time, the goldfish thing, which has been debunked so many times, and yet people talk about it all the time. It's not that we have a shorter attention span. We have a greater ability to smell BS and go, oh, this guy's going to waste my time. Like, it's just, it's, I think that's the big thing is, but that, Mark had a point. Let me go back. The chat room's going bonkers
Well,
today.
you better not listen. In the first 5 minutes, you better bring your best. Like,
Yeah.
that's for sure, right? Have your
Yeah.
best stuff up front. And so because you will lose them. Like, if it's uncomfortable or it's slow or it's not there, yeah, you do run the risk of them dropping off. So make sure your best content's up
Yeah.
front.
But just to bring up Mission Impossible, very consistent franchise. Like, I knew what that movie was before I even bought my popcorn.
Yeah.
I also knew that Tom Cruise didn't die doing the stunts because I saw him on Jimmy Kimmel.
Don't spoil it. It just came out last night.
Yeah. But,
no spoilers.
No, I'm not telling him, we've all know what the stunts are, but I'm just saying it's like, yeah. But Mark says, okay, I've done that. But what comes next? How do I take relevant data from that? So if it's less than 70% and people like your show, great. Proof of concept then. We know that works, that what's there. Now it's a matter of where's your call to action. And that's really to why Courtney did that. Her main point was, if you're waiting to do your call to action till the end of your show and nobody's making it to the end of your show, that's probably why nobody's buying stuff. So when a lot of times the next step is, how do I monetize this? And that's where, let's say you're selling courses. Okay, when you go to your sales page, are you using the pastor? Are you doing copywriting, right? Here's my problem. If you don't fix this problem, it's only going to get worse. And I have the solution, PAST. And here is I forget what the T stands for, but somewhere in there, it's like, is it easy to buy? And is it one click? Like, oh, click here. Because I've talked to Mark about this. It's kind of like click, and then you got to click, and then you got to go to the click. I'm like, that's too many clicks. So and sometimes, like, I have more clicks than I want on the School of Podcasting, but that's kind of the system I'm using. And so the choice is, do you switch systems, or do you just kind of go, well, I've got to really explain the value then to that. And then from there, to kind of go to Ralph's point a lot is like, hey, I want to advertise, right? Since we're talking movies, whoever made it, Paramount maybe, or whoever, right? They spent a lot of money. Tom did a lot of promotion. And then I went last night because I was like, hey, it's this weekend. So I went and saw it, and it worked. We're talking about that movie now. And if you like Mission Impossible movies, you will like this movie. It's very Mission Impossible. And that's the movie industry. You spend lots of money on, first of all, you spend lots of money making the product. You edit the crap out of that. You let people see it before you launch the movie to get feedback. And then once you know it resonates with your audience, then you put it out there, and then you ask people to share it with their friends. And while you're doing that, you also spend more money to let people know that, here's the movie. And that's the fun part, is spending the money is, well, what works? And that That's why that's why the answer is always it depends. Because I could spend money in the right place in front of the right people. And if they land on your website and they don't know what to do, okay, well, I could have the best website, spend boatloads of money on the wrong people. That's not good. I mean, there's so many parts. And it's interesting because I'm studying Facebook ads right now. And it's the copy. Is the copyright getting people to push their triggers and their buttons to even click the button? So there's that. And then there's the actual landing page. And then the landing page, is it easy to buy? But if you've got proof of concept, it's a matter of, okay. And that's where like Mark does practicalprepping.info. And it's and he's got a bazillion people in his Facebook. The one thing I would do, Mark, to test is write a post or something that you think should resonate with that group. And I honestly don't know. Let's say he has 10,000 people. It's a lot of people in his group. So let's say he has 10,000 people and he says something that's so like everybody should thumbs up and attaboy and whatever. And he gets, I don't know, 92 people out of 10,000. That group isn't as big as you think it is. So look at because that's the thing. As much as I love Facebook and it's free, I've seen other groups that I'm in where people will post and you're like, wait, there's 130,000 people in here and there were 7 comments on this. It's like, well, and if you want to really check, go into Facebook, look at your groups and see all the groups you're subscribed to, or YouTube, look at your subscriptions. There are a lot of people we subscribe to that we're not really interactive with. So that's the other tricky part, is sometimes we have an audience, but we don't have the right audience. But it's a matter of, I don't know if like is there some sort of prepping con to go to? That's what's kind of tricky. And I know Mark's gone the smart route. He's got courses to help you be prepared for hurricanes and, all the nasty things that come along, or you get snowed out, or, all that. He always kind of jokes. It's not zombies. It's not aliens. It's not Bigfoot. It's what to do when really bad things happen. Like, I don't know, the power goes out and you can't do your podcast. See, if I'd been listening to a show, I would have had I don't think it would have helped if I'd had a generator, because I think my internet was out. I think AT&T went down in the area as well.
Oh, yeah, that would have been bad. It's not like a podcast with a guy who obsesses about having power backups available in his home. You and I talked about that via text. I was like, it didn't go out on me. I was ready.
Yeah, Mark asks, analyzing this, how do we determine if our content is resonating? I'm an old teacher. I say if I get below 70%, I got a problem in listening. Yeah, because I know
depends on your audience.
Yeah,
like if you're in the model trains, that audience is super small. No, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make that sound like
not a lot. Ray's going to come hunt you down.
I know, sorry, Ray. It's just, but it's not. It's like stamp collecting. Like that's a very niche. I should have used the word niche. That would have been a better. Sorry, Ray, for that. But it's a very niche. How do you know, like in those scenarios, how do you know it's working for your audience? You're getting some feedback from them. They're opening dialogue with you. Some of the best YouTubers that I watch, they're really good at interacting with their audience. They know how to manage the comments and those things that come in.
Yeah.
They're listen, interesting is more, I think in today's world, interesting is more than just having having a lot of numbers. I think it's because your topic may limit you. I watched this YouTuber, this guy, his name is Nick. He's a geologist out of Washington State. And he puts stuff, he's got really well-made stuff, and he's got stuff that's just from his classroom, right? He's a college professor, and he's kind of quirky, and but he doesn't have the best technique, and he's kind of all over the place, but he's kind of like a comedy teacher. He gets up there, he says funny things. At least they're funny to me. That's no matter what he does, he teaches the geology of the state of Washington here in the United States, right? He focuses on the geology. Listen to this, the geology of the state of Washington. No matter what he does, not going to have big numbers. he's going to have to really get audience feedback to see. And he asks for a lot, and he mentions it a lot, and he's got a lot of friends in the space that do it, but his number's going to be small. He's got me. He has me though. I'm very interested in that. Why would I be interested in the geology of Washington State? I do not know. I've just gotten fascinated with it over the last couple of years. So depending on that, right, it really depends on that topic. Then the broader topics are even harder in some ways, because now you're in a much bigger pool and you're in a much bigger space. You're competing, because the money in advertising gravitates towards the more generic content. Let's just be honest. They want the ability to grab a larger audience. They want the ability to, if in Ralph's case, say you're doing financial planning or financial analysis. Well, now you're competing. I mean, there's a lot of big names in this space, including one Ramsey, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you now you're playing in a bigger space with people who have a lot more money and a lot more influence and a lot more connections. And by the way, that's another area you're thinking about in your podcast. Are you connected to all the other influencers in that space? Have you spent some time reaching out, making sure you're friends with them? And so I just think there's some opportunities there to kind of learn and grow in that way.
Yeah. Mark says we got about a 2% response, which is about normal for a survey. He says we got some good points, did some tweaking. So that's how you get better. You kind of ask them. I am right now. I joined, I saw her. I'm a big Heartbeat fan. And I think she kind of works for Heartbeat, but she's a community person, and it's Ember, and Ember is EMBER, as in like a fire ember, emberconsulting.co. I'll give her a shout out here. But she has a course about growing a group. And it's funny when people tell you to do stuff and you're like, oh, what? And she was like, accept the challenge, get 10 people on the phone with you. She goes, call 10 different people. Want to find out what your audience wants? Get them on the phone. I challenge you to go. She goes, if you have to give out your phone number, make it a Zoom call. And she goes, and make it for an hour, at least a half hour, not 15 minutes. It's got to be a decent conversation and find out what they want. And I always go back to the time I did that by accident and send out, it was supposed to go out to 10 people on my email list. And I was like, hey, I'm doing some, what do you call it when you do research for, I guess, product research or whatever. But I was basically like, hey, I'm trying to find out what's working and what's not. And it was supposed to go to 10 people. I had a filter to where it was only supposed to go to 10 people on my email list, and went out to the whole thing. And so for a solid week, if not two, I just had back to back Zoom calls. And it was one of the best things I ever did, because I got to physically see my audience and find out what was working and what wasn't, and that whole 9 yards. So that's, now is that advanced? It's advanced on your calendar, because your calendar just went poof, and now you know what you're doing. But that is something that's kind of tricky. Brad says, I agree with Jim on this one. Super fans will listen to all of it. Yeah, John said that too. John Jamango, who's like, the core hard listeners will listen to you read the phone book. So that's something else to keep in mind. We got there. Mark says there are prepper shows. I would definitely go to one and have a booth if you can. Booths are expensive. I don't care what kind of show it is. Man, that's a lot of money. Plus, you're going to sneeze at least $2,000 getting there. It's kind of tricky, but Dan from again, based on a true story podcast, in my honest opinion, beginner equals no prerequisites to learn the topic. Intermediate, some prerequisites. In advanced, you must already know the basic and intermediate before understanding this part of the topic. Yeah, that's a good definition. It's just hard to throw that into podcasting. Ralph says, just heard there's a college in England that offers a degree. There's one in New York City. There are people, if you want to spend $1,000, you can pay somebody to be a podcast consultant, or you can just come here and I will look at you for free and go, I dubbed thee a podcast consultant. It's, because trust me, there are a lot of podcast consultants that, in my opinion, are on the basic level, but that's just me. We're talking pet peeves. Jody says, oh yeah, that's my pet peeve when I'm on a podcast and they ask me to introduce myself. I'm like, you invited me on your podcast. I had someone last night sent the guest form. What is the title of the episode you would like to do? I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you asked me? Like, why am I doing your homework? So, and then of course the discussion of AI has come up, and there are ways that it's good. And then there are people like Chris that say, it's kind of lazy, especially now with AI to assist you in creating a more succinct framework for your intros. Yep. Here's the thing. I'm not making this up.
I disagree. Do
you?
By the way, I do.
Well, but here's the thing I'm seeing, and I'm not making this up. I was in a group and they were talking about AI, and I am of AI is great to take what you've written and enhance it. I'm not a big fan of like, hey, write me a paragraph and I'll read it in my show. But the thing I saw all these people chiming in. So I saw people saying, I want AI to come up with the topics. And I saw other people that said, I want AI to write it for me. And then I saw other people saying, I want AI to publish it for me and promote it. To me, I just want to go, if you don't want to do a podcast, don't do a podcast. Like if you want it to come up with the topics, write it, promote it, all you do is talk into a mic. I'm like, who doesn't want that? And while you're at it, make lots of money doing that. But it just seems like I smell, I'm like, it kind of smells like you don't want to do anything. You just want AI to and all these ideas are going to be brilliant and great and write the latest technology. So I get a little worried when I hear that. But Jim, you disagree with AI is making us lazy.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't clear. What I disagree with, going back to Jody's comment about the introducing people and the comments about, hey, take a second, introduce yourself or tell us some things. I think this is an area you need to ask your guest what they prefer. Because there are in both in my world on the tech side and my world in the strengths or the Gallup side of things, there are individuals who want you to actually read their bio. As much as we hate it, Dave, there's a moment when you need to say doctor. There's a moment when you need to explain what those initials mean. There's a moment when they've done a lot of work to get to where they are. They want someone else to read that bio. And even though your best practice is people don't want to hear that, they want that. They're there and they're asking for that respect. And I think it's appropriate at that point to respect them and say, okay, if you want me to read your bio, you could say to them, hey, typically on this show, we don't do that. I find our listeners don't like it when I read it. Would you be okay if we have a short conversation? I'll do a few things about you and then you fill in the best parts of you. Now, there's some people that's not comfortable with that. They don't like talking about themselves. And you kind of need to usher that thing along. This is a mistake I've made a lot. And I need to ask that question more is, how do you prefer to be introduced? Like, what style do you want me to conform to make sure you're comfortable? Because I just did the most recent interview I did last week. We just got right into it, and he was perfectly fine talking. He likes talking about himself, likes likes saying those kinds of things. They liked it. It's somebody who does that very, very often. I'm very comfortable with that. With somebody saying, "Hey, I've got Jim Collison here. He's works for Gallup, does this, blah blah blah." Jim, welcome to the show. Let's get to know you a little bit. Tell me the best about you. That's not what the question I would use, but that's the whole idea, right? I'm very, very comfortable giving 2 minutes on the best of me based on the audience they have, but I'm a podcaster. Like I do this all the time. So I think it might be wise to not say we read it all the time or we don't read it at all, or it's a bad idea. It may be a better idea to just say, to consult with the person and say, hey, I've got I've got some time for us to get to know you. What are you most comfortable with? Or what would you like me to do for you to make you the most comfortable, right? I think that's probably not a bad question to add. Maybe that's advanced podcasting. I hate that word, by the way, but maybe that's advanced, right? break your style and make it fit the guest so that they have the best experience possible.
Yeah, because the one thing, and I now that you've said this, you had me worried because you're like, well, some people don't like to talk about themselves, and I'm like, well, then they shouldn't be on the podcast. But
they're
I
there
get
to
what you
talk
mean.
about a subject, right?
Not themselves.
They
Yes.
might be a rocket scientist, and they're really good at talking about rockets, but they're uncomfortable talking about themselves, or they just have they listen. There's a lot of people who've worked really hard to get maybe this is where the advanced degrees come in, right? This is where maybe advanced is appropriate. They've worked really hard to get advanced degrees, or they've worked really hard to get some kind of industry recognition. That's super important. And you're like, hey Bob, it's Dr. Jones. Like, that we should probably,
Yeah.
in some cases, make sure we're, back to your Jim and Jeff thing, right?
Yeah.
We should probably make sure and again, this is experience talking here. I've failed in this area several times. I should probably ask some questions. What do you prefer to be called? What do some of those, some of you are really good at this, by the way. But for me, what do you want me to call you during the podcast? What's appropriate? Do you want me to read the bio? Because those first 5 minutes, I've done it where I could tell I threw somebody off in the first 5 minutes, and then the rest of it was it was just okay. So that may not be a bad thing to think about in the way you introduce guests. If AI, listen, you can do all the AI stuff you want, but if you haven't cleared it with the guest,
Yeah.
like if you AI them and then say, you're reading these things, and listen, I've had people grab old bios of me, like from things I
yeah.
hadn't updated somewhere, and then they're like, Jim is this and that and these kinds of things, and then you're like, actually, none of that's true.
Right.
Like that's a 10-year-old bio. Sorry we didn't cover this in advance.
When my headshot has Dave without a beard, like, come on, where did you dig that out of MySpace?
Oh yeah.
Or
right on.
I did, and you make a great point, because I've been introduced many times at conferences before I speak. I don't remember the ones, but I remember the guy that really blew it. There's because he said, I need to know one thing about you that most people don't know. And I go, I used to play in a band called the Sugar Daddies. And that was the one thing he brought up. And I was like, yeah, but I'm also School of Podcast. Can you please say School of Podcasting? Can you? Nope, just Sugar Daddies. Thank you so much. I was like, oh, so, but who I'm not.
One more thing, and then we'll go
Yeah.
with awesome. When you're interviewing experts, or you're interviewing people who you get an exclusive and they're not on podcasts all the time, they're not all good at this. Like we think they are, or they think they should be. Hey, you're an expert in your field. You should be. Well, maybe this is their first podcast. Maybe this is a time that maybe this is a medium they're not good at. The goal for you is not to make them conform to you, but you conform to them to get the best content out of them possible. So make sure you're doing a little bit of homework. If you're going to do any homework, study that guest and their style and ask them some good questions so that how am I going to get the best out of you, right? How am I going to get the best out of you? They may not be good, and to Ralph's point there, they may not be good about talking about themselves. They may not be comfortable with that. Read their bio. Get that out of the way. Let the audience know why they're there for that stuff, and then move on to the content that matters. But if they're not good at doing that, or they're uncomfortable doing it, doesn't mean they're bad. It just means maybe they haven't got a chance to do it very often. But you won't know unless you ask the questions. So anyways, sorry. I wanted to wrap that up. Let's thank our awesome supporters.
Let's do that. You can be an awesome supporter. And by the way, we have a new one coming next week. We'll talk about that next week. We'll give them a big shout out. But you can be an awesome supporter by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. We're also brought to you by the School of Podcasting, where you have courses, coaching, and community. It's all there, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're like, not sure if that's for me, you got 30 days to figure it out. And if on day 29, you're like, yeah, no thanks, I'll give you your money back. Use the coupon code COACH when you sign up. And we're using Podpage when you go over to askthepodcastcoach.com. If you want to try Podpage, go to trypodpage.com. That is my affiliate link. And right now we're using Ecamm. You can find Ecamm by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. And Cam has 2 M's because it's good. And if you need more Jim Collison, and hey, who doesn't? Look at him there. So awesome. You can see more of Jim over at theaverageguy.tv and check out his show, Home Gadget Geeks. And it is time for us to go and see the featured, or not the featured, but the awesome supporter of the week. And speaking of Ralph, he has, can you guys see this comment box? No, you can't. That's good. I was like, oh, how much of this is being shown? But actually, we've got 2 on here. I'm going to do a big shout out on Ralph next week about his new show, but it's on the wheel. It's Growth and Grit Business. But he's rebranded Ask Ralph to a new brand, which is, it's now, used to be Ask Ralph. It was a show about finance for Christians. Now it's Financially Confident Christians. So you can find that. We'll put a link in the show notes, or all things Ralph are out at askralph.com. And who's going to be the awesome supporter? Well, we're going to spin the wheel and see who we end up with. And I will not call it early. Last week I thought we were done, and kind of like this week. It was looking like Ed, but no, it's Greg over at indiedropin.com. If you have a scary show, if you have a comedy show, there are a bunch of audiences over there that Greg has already lined up, and you can basically reach out to Greg. He will put you on that website and help you find more audiences, more peoples, more listeners. There we go. More, well, you know what I'm talking about. Likewise, as we move on here, if you want to be an awesome supporter, because you're sitting there thinking, this show saves me time, it saves me headaches, maybe it saved you some money, maybe we're keeping you educated, maybe we made you think today. Well, if you're not a member of the School of Podcasting, that's one way to be an awesome supporter. But if you just want to support this show, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And, you can join for as little as $5. So thank you to all of our awesome supporters. We deeply appreciate that. And congrats to Greg over at Indie Drop-In. And I stall here every week because I'm clicking on Ecamm because I'm trying to get the, back, the chat box. And I'm clicking on, you know what? I have to get rid of, that's it. I had to get rid of the screen with Greg. The wheel of names is waiting for me to go, I'm done spinning. I'm like, what am I doing? Where's the stupid box with everything that I need? So, because Ralph had a question, unless Jim, you were saying that we needed to go.
No, I was going to say we can go to Ralph's question. I think it's a good one about buying email lists.
Yeah, it's so the question is, let me go to the top, and then we had a couple questions here. I'm thinking about doing some email marketing, and I've been exploring buying email lists, but they are super expensive, and I wonder if they're really valid. Thoughts and opinions. And to which Dan already answered, I've never bought an email list, but I would be highly skeptical of anyone selling them since it's easy to fake them. My general response to buying email lists is just, I don't know, Jim, do they do that at Gallup? Anytime I know anybody that's done them, they're like, well, just realize that a large percent of it is never going to be delivered. And
well, it depends, right? Depends on the company
of course
that you're buying them from, right? Depends where they got them from. It depends how new they are. During the Great Resignation, right? We saw our customer database. When I say customer, I mean the coaches in my community were changing a third every year. A third of the database was changing every year, and that happened for like 3 years in a row. Lots of folks were changing jobs. Lots of folks were changing email addresses. I've also noticed, because I do this on a daily basis, I noticed that a lot of our customers are even changing their Gmail accounts on a regular basis. So, they're like, oh, no, I don't use that Gmail account anymore. I use this Gmail account.
Right.
So, then, of course, because of the onslaught of spam and just the sheer amount of emails that are being blocked, the chances are you could, if you're sending them on your behalf, they could be going to someone's spam folder, depending upon how you're doing the sending, right? some folks automatically say you're using a service to send those emails. Is that service you're using, have they been blacklisted because of sending so many advertising emails? Have they been blacklisted by a lot of services? And if you're buying a lot of organizational or workplace emails, folks that work at Apple or folks that work at, the actual workplace emails, right? Lots of times those email providers, right, those companies are blocking a whole host of email. So if it's 1,000 and it's expensive, you need to ask those questions of when were they last validated?
Right.
How do you know that they're good email addresses? Now, in some cases, and it could be events do a lot of this, where they have an event for a specific genre of something, whatever. Let's say Comic-Con, right? And that event was last month, and they harvested 20,000 emails from that event, and you're buying them. That was in November, and you're buying them in December. Chances are those emails are pretty good, right? There you got, and if that's the niche you're trying to reach for that, you got a good shot at that. If it's been a year, right? Some of those, some of those. So, Ralph, I think there's a lot of questions you have to ask to who you're buying the list from. And, if it's a dark web company, well, it's probably not. They're probably not very good. But, I know that's not what you're doing. I'm just joking. But you got to ask those questions.
Yeah. He says, they tell me they have a list by denomination. He says, I want to reach out to churches to share my daily devotional show, but they want $185 for 1,000 email address per 1,000 emails. And it's like, yeah.
Well, listen, if they're good, like if they're actually good and valid, that's not actually, and if it's your niche, like, and you're really getting to the right people, that $185 may be super valuable, depending upon what you're sending them, right? Depending
Right.
upon what you're sending them. I did a direct mailing one time, and I spent a few extra dollars to put it in a more important looking envelope from the U.S. Postal Service, so that when people got it, they'd be like, oh, I need to open this. Like, it wasn't just a letter, it was a registered letter or whatever. I forget what I used for that. So in this case, if it's these email addresses are correct, are collected correctly, and it's the right target audience, and you're sending them the right thing, right? From an ROI perspective, $185 may actually be cheap.
Yeah, and the hard part, because part of me goes, well, just reach out to local churches and offer to do a free financial thing. And I remember there was a guy once that joined my church for about 2 weeks. And when he basically just came in, I barely knew him, and just started spamming people in the congregation with like, I can help you with it. It's like, okay. And when I kind of politely said, hey, like, people are complaining that because he was very aggressive on trying to get people. I think he was in real estate or something. So again, go to where your audience is, make friends with them, and then tell them. But if you knew somebody at another church and you said, hey, if they ever want to do a free Ask Ralph financial consulting thing to a group of people, and then at the top and the end of it, instead of promoting your accounting, you promote your podcast, which your podcast would then promote your accounting or whatever it is, your books that are going on there. That might be a thing. It's tricky. I just know, man, it's been probably 30 years since I played with email lists. I worked for a company that was really briefly they were kind of spammy, and we were out just going to anybody's email address and just harvesting their email. And I was like, I need a shower when I go home. I'm like, because I know what you're going to do with that.
Well, remember an email that way is equivalent to, maybe worse now, than a cold call. And so, that percentage, in that case, right, 3% is high. I would say 1%.
Yeah.
Right. So you're down a pretty small number, and then you got to really turn over those 1%. I would listen. It's probably worth trying once just to see how good the list is, right? With the very, very low expectations. I would prefer the referral networks in this kind of situation, these referral networks where get to know some influencers in the space, get known by people who will then use your name in some of those areas. And then once the ground's been tilled a little bit with some help in these areas, some influencers saying things, some people who know you in that space, then I think those emails are way more effective after people have heard about you. You know, you've done a seminar in the area, or you've done one at the church. This is where, free loss leader thing to go out and do and speak on in an area may till the ground a little bit for that, for those email marketing stuff. People at least have heard your name. They've seen you. You're not just showing up for the first time. Those emails get deleted from when they land in my box. I don't care how many. Listen, Dave, you and I get peppered, and probably everybody listening does too, of all these. We want to help you grow your audience or your influence on YouTube or whatever. I read the first sentence and they're gone. Whatever list they got me from, hopefully they didn't pay very much for it. So I've never heard of them before. But I get an email from Dave Jackson that says, hey, I've learned this thing. Well, I'm going to read it because I know Dave Jackson.
Yeah, it's because what he's saying here is, to be clear, I'm looking to market my daily show to church pastors. So I'm looking to contact them via email. And so think about this. Yeah. Hi, Jim. I understand you are the head pastor at Church of Life there in Arkansas. I'm Dave. I do a daily podcast. It's a devotional, kind of the stuff that you're doing at your church where you're leading your flock. I'd like to lead your flock just for every day for 7 minutes. Is that cool with you? That guy's going to be like, wait, what? Like you want to.
Yeah. Most of them aren't going to have the time.
They're going to be like, So I would say, because they're churches, you want to watch me get in trouble? Offer them some money, because there are churches that, maybe, and say, I'd like to send you a flyer that you could hang on a bulletin board that has this and a QR code. And I would be happy to pay, because you're basically buying a billboard on their bulletin board. And there are some churches that they're like, oh, man, we're all about the Benjamins. Yeah, because, they're nonprofit. So that might be something.
Well, and maybe the in this case, the lead pastor, the head pastor, the whatever senior pastor, depending on the denomination,
right?
You might be the wrong person. You might you might need the stewardship or the the director of finance or the whatever, and the value proposition in that has to be, what can I do for your church? Like, what are, like, so don't, and Ralph, I know you know all this. There's others that are listening.
But that's a really good point, because if you want free stuff for your podcast, you don't talk to the sales team, because they're going to try to sell you one. You talk to the marketing team, because they're the ones that are trying to get the word out. So,
and again, listen, we're shooting in the dark here there's 1,000 different examples of how this could or shouldn't work. So, I think it's worth looking at, Ralph, from back to the original question. I think it's worth looking at. The question is a pure ROI question.
Yeah.
Out of those thousands, based on the people they're giving you, is that we don't know that. So based on the people they're giving you and the position they're in and the region it is and the propensity for them to actually follow up on the email, is it worth $185 to reach 1,000 people on that? And I think you just got to do some you're the financial guy, do a financial analysis plan on that thing and say, is the ROI there to get it done? And this is not just for this situation, but anytime you're getting ready to spend money, you have to make that decision if you're going to spend. I think I subscribed to Descript this month I bought the monthly plan for $35. I was backed into a corner and I needed their help. Was it worth $35 for me to pay for 1 month to get out of a jam? Yes, it was. I happily dropped down the $35 and said, yes, thanks for Descript. Thanks for getting me out of a jam, right, on this. So there's an ROI question, and I know that's what he's asking. So now that we have all that information, you got all that information, Ralph, take that back do an ROI plan based on those things. And if it's worth it to you, spend it. If it's not, don't.
Yeah. One other quick question here. Dan has, with the rise of shorter and shorter clips, do you think basically any long form content will be seen as advanced? Maybe. I could see where everybody's going to call it a deep dive. That's a good point. Because if I see a clip of one question of an interview, the rest of the interview isn't advanced. It's just more of that stuff. But if it's a how-to thing, maybe that's next week's topic, is how-to dead. I think it was Kevin Schmidlin brought that up. He's like, look, man, nobody's going to listen to a how-to podcast because you can just go to Perplexity and it'll give you exactly what you need. And I'm like, yeah, but some people read and some people listen. And plus then there's the whole personality thing and that whole 9 yards. But yeah, always fun. One last thing here on AI. Chrissy from Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I want AI to help me see what a less experienced person may think about my topic. It helps me start with more basic parts of a topic before getting techie. All AI is my average Joe. So she's using it as a
For sure.
Yeah, a way to kind of critique her content before it goes out. So I've done that. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Well, I ran an episode of The Future of Podcasting with myself and Daniel J. Lewis, and it pointed out, it's like, you guys use a lot of jargon and you don't really explain what it is. And I was like, good point. But then I looked at my audience and I'm like, nope, my audience will understand what that jargon is. I understand it's jargon, but the people that we're trying to attract know what that means. So it gave me some good feedback. And I was like, but again, feedback always comes with, is there a point to that? Do they have a point? Yeah. And then it's either like, okay, you're right. I'm going to change the way I deliver my content or whatever it is. Or, yep, that's a point, but for my audience, this is okay kind of thing. Or that's a great point, but that doesn't align with the goal of the show. So that's another way I've used AI. Go ahead.
It's a good way. Well, to your point, like, we wouldn't have McDonald's if a couple guys didn't think they could do burgers and fries a different way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so you is it pioneering? Is it cutting edge? I mean, was it at first, did people go, that's weird? Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of folks like, what is up with this? When McDonald's first started doing the things that we're doing. And a lot of the things that we have today that are standard started out as weird. So don't think that you got to fit into that mold all the time and be like, well, I'm going to do it the advanced way. No, do it your way. It may be, it may not, but it may be the next new way that we do things. And we would hate to lose something because you tried to be standard, or you listen to AI, right? From that standpoint. AI's got a lot of great things to say, but it's just like a person. Take it with a grain of salt. Do things the way you think it's best, and let your talent shine, as opposed to trying to fit in the mold. We don't need another. Back to the original. We don't need another Dave Ramsey. Like, Dave Ramsey is Dave Ramsey,
right?
Who's the other guy that we talk about all the time? What's his name? The real popular podcaster. Why is his name escaping me?
Jim Collison, Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, thank you.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. Thanks for throwing my name in there. Don't be Joe Rogan. You be you.
Yeah.
You can do it in the style of Joe Rogan, but don't be Joe Rogan. So
yeah,
there you go.
That doesn't work. Well, Jim, what's coming up on the Average Guy.tv over there on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Doug Milburn joins me from 45 Drives. We had some conversations early in the show in the chat room about backups, right? And so 45 Drives is doing some very interesting things with their hardware and their services around both enterprise servers, and they have a home lab space as well. Anyways, great interview. This is the one I did it a couple weeks ahead of time and then played the interview in live using Restream. So if you want to see how that worked and how I managed that conversation, both live and recorded, we did that here. It's out on homegadgetgeeks.com right now.
Nice. And I mentioned it earlier on the School of Podcast. I looked at my notes. I have 22 pages of notes on how to write a good opening hook. That's ridiculous. I think I've done a little bit too much research on this.
Like it.
Yeah, so that's what's coming up. And by the end of this, I should be a master of writing good hooks, I hope. A lot of videos. And the thing that's interesting about YouTube, again, is I'm talking to an audio audience. I will mention the YouTube stuff, but it's, as always, when you jump into YouTube, you've added more stuff to the mix. That means you've got more things to think about and all. But thanks to everybody in the chat room. This is a lot of fun today. This could have been easily a 2-hour show. Holy cow. But we're always happy that you're here. Thanks to Chris from castahead.net for the super cash, whatever. Clicking the little $sign button thingy. I appreciate that. And of course, Mark over at podcastbranding.co. And everybody go over to basedonatruestorypodcast.com and check out Dan. We will see you next week, of course, as long as we both have electricity. And thanks so much. We'll see you again real soon with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach.
Blow some cash on the way out. Let's see some cash.